One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. And not just because this is the last Friday before Christmas, because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 41 years. We are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. The Heartland Institute and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to leave your comments underneath this video. We do read them. All of these things help convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the show in front of even more people. And a reminder, Big Tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program. So Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So the best way you can support this program, and I really hope you want to do that, is to visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And with a tax-deductible donation, that's right, tax-deductible, you can help bring this show to the world every single week. We also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We got a big show to end the year today. So let's get started. Today we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, the Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, 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 Anthony. Merry Christmas. Anthony also publishes the world's most viewed website on climate change. What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett. He's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at Heartland, and Linnea Lueken, a research fellow for energy environment policy at the Heartland Institute. And thank you also to Andy Singer, our producer extraordinaire behind the scenes, making sure the show looks and flows fantastic. We have a little special show. This is going to be our last episode of 2025, thanks to the holidays coming up. We have 2 announcements to make to close off this year. One of them is something that a lot of our viewers and friends of the Heartland Institute have been asking us about off and on for months now. And it's, will the Heartland Institute have another climate conference, an international conference on climate change? The answer is yes. We have made the plans. We've made the confirmations. The 16th International Conference on Climate Change, presented by the Heartland Institute, will be held April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. at the Hotel Washington. You can go to climateconference.heartland.org and get your tickets today. We have an early bird rate, so you can get a little discount on your conference tickets. That runs from now until January 31st. There's the website there. You can hit, it's not populated with the schedule yet because we're still working that out. It is going to be fantastic. Everybody who is anybody in the climate realist movement is going to be there. They are going to be speaking, and you get to meet them. And it's also a great place to network and meet in person so many people in the chat, fans of this. I hope you guys will consider joining us April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. at the Hotel Washington for the 16th International Conference on Climate Change. Sterling and Anthony, I know, and Linnea too, all you guys people reach out to you and have been asking about whether we're going to have a conference, and now you can all tell them yes.
Yep, I was at a meeting this week, Institute for Policy Innovation, and I mentioned it. I said, get your tickets now before it's too late.
Yes.
Yeah, I've probably had 3 or 4 people over the last 6 months ask me if we're doing another conference, and I've been holding my tongue because we didn't officially announce that we were doing one. but I'm happy to finally be able to tell people, yeah.
Right. Oh, and I must mention that space is limited. We are not able to sell hundreds and hundreds of tickets this year as we've had in years past. The venue is a little smaller than we had maybe hoped, but it is a limited size. So if you want to attend and you want to participate and learn so much about climate and energy policy, meet people who are leading the world in pushing climate realism, you need to be at this conference. So we hope to see you there. All right. Now, this is usually where I say that we're going to cover the crazy climate news of the week, but since it's the last show of 2025, we're going to be covering the crazy climate news of the year. Hit it, Andy. Excellent. Thank you very much, Bill Nye, for the work you do for this program every week without any compensation. All right. It's called fair use, guys. It's totally fine. All right. We all picked a story that we think is probably one of the biggest climate stories of the year. And for me, I picked out my own, and it's how the electric vehicle market has collapsed. I've brought it up a lot on this show. We've brought it up a lot on this show over the year. I'm going to read a little bit from an excellent wrap-up of the collapse of the electric vehicle market from our friend Francis Menton, who runs the Manhattan Contrarian blog. And his headline is Electric Vehicle Collapse. Wow, that was quick. Oh, but I'm sorry, this is my mistake, Andy. We do have a video, and so we're going to do a little before and after. The before is this video. Please play that, Andy.
That regardless of who is actually occupying the White House, this transition is happening. It is happening in the United States at the subnational level and with the private sector and with NGOs. It is happening globally with countries that you all represent who are not turning back. The absence of leadership in the White House does not mean that this energy transition is stopped. In fact, I would say to countries who might see the U.S. stepping back from climate policy as a reason to step back themselves, I would say to the contrary, this is the time to accelerate, to fill that gap that may be left by leadership in the United States. But truly, this transition is happening, and there's no turning back. Thanks, everybody.
You are made of stupid.
Merry Christmas,
That's
Anthony.
the best laugh I've had all year.
Merry Christmas, Anthony. That was just for you. That was my gift to you. Yeah, I've had that drop in the studio for months and have never known when I could drop it. So I thought I just added to that thing. But yes, that person made of stupid is one Jennifer Granholm, who got quite wealthy in the energy stock market while she was energy secretary. Funny how that happens. Well, as usual, she was wrong. And I could have grabbed the news of the EV collapse from anywhere, but like I said, I wanted to give some love to Francis Menton of Manhattan Contrarian, who actually was a speaker at our most recent climate conference. So I'll read a little bit here. It was less than 3 years ago, early 2023, that I was writing about the then universal government and industry line that EVs would soon be taking over the American car market. In April 2022, the Biden administration had adopted aggressive vehicle mileage standards intended to be achievable only through rapid transition to EVs. Our climate leader states like California and New York had then adopted regulations in August and September of 2022, respectively, mandating a phase out of sales of combustion vehicles to culminate in the year 2035, after which only electric vehicles would be allowed. In a post on January 2023, this is Francis Menton saying this, I linked to the websites of Ford and GM, where they both touted their grand plans for rapid conversion of their companies to the manufacture of mostly or entirely EVs. At the time, Ford was claiming that it would, quote, lead America's shift to EVs and would achieve 50% of its sales in that category by 2030. General Motors bragged about its, quote, path to an all-electric future by 2035. The past few weeks have brought a lot of news on the EV front. The short version is that even I would not have predicted how quickly and completely the EV fantasy has collapsed. The background, of course, is that the second Trump administration took prompt steps on re-entering office to end the huge federal support that had been propping up EV sales. The large tax credit for EV purchases was ended by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed on July 4th and effective after September 30th, 2025. On December 3rd, the administration announced the rollback of the vehicle mileage standards known as CAFE to levels at which combustion vehicles would still be able to comply. Ford Motor on Monday said it expected to take about $19.5 billion in charges. It lost, that is, mainly tied to its EV business, a massive hit as the automaker retrenches in the face of sinking electric vehicle demand. The $19.5 billion from Ford is in addition to some $13 billion in operating losses that Ford incurred over the past 3 years trying to compete in the EV business. That's a combined $32.5 billion in losses for Ford. General Motors, by the way, is taking a $1.6 billion loss. Tesla sales are down 13%. And both J.D. Power and S&P Global Mobility estimate that October's EV market share plummeted to around only 5% of the market in the United States from a record high of over 12% just the month before. The month before was when the subsidies, where you and me help people buy expensive EVs, expired. So that's to me one of the biggest climate energy stories of the year. Sterling, I always like going to you with these stories, and we've said, I told you so on this topic over and over. Well, we told them so, and reality is undefeated.
Reality is undefeated. And you talk about all these companies. Look, you didn't talk about Rivian slaying off people left and right. I suspect it won't be around in 2 years. I could be wrong, but it's in trouble. Even look, China is I think it's BVD or BID, I forget, but one of the Chinese companies is now the largest EV manufacturer in the world on highly subsidized. I mean, basically below cost sales vehicle, and they are consolidating. They are shrinking on slowed sales, and that's the Chinese. That's Europe isn't buying as many Chinese cars. We were never buying the Chinese cars. So it is just not the case that EVs were ever market demand. It was always government demand driven, either by mandates for fuel economy, supposedly fuel economy were really emissions reductions, and subsidies given to them, welfare for the well-to-do, because that's all it was. It's largely the upper middle class and upper classes that buy these vehicles, and they're usually not their prime vehicles. They're usually their first or second vehicles. It's fairly gratifying to know that we were right, and all these rich, wealthy, knowledgeable people were wrong. The transition has it ended? No, but it's come to a trickle. It's like when you get out of your shower and you turn it off and there's still a drip. Well, that's where we are with EVs now.
Yeah, we have I'm sorry, one of these comments here is from Sam, is in the smooth, in China, EVs are exploding. And when I saw that, I meant, in sales or literally? It's hard to say.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, but even the sales have slowed.
Yeah. I think that this is a real case of the market has spoken and spoken loudly, because in that article that you cite, Jim, there's a sentence that I really like. Both J.D. Power and S&P Global Mobility estimate that October's EV market share plummeted to around 5% in the United States from a record high of over 12% in September.
Yeah.
I mean, boom.
Well, I think everyone has to realize EVs failed in the marketplace more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
The first vehicles off the line were electric vehicles, were battery-powered vehicles. They couldn't compete with combustion engines then, and they can't compete now without huge government support.
Yeah, the only functioning Detroit Electric that's still around, which is the first electric vehicle, I think, is owned by Jay Leno, and he drives it around just for fun, and that's it. But he doesn't drive it far.
I do, electric vehicles have utility if you have, kind of a short commute in the city or whatever every day, and you don't have to park it inside of a downtown city parking garage where it can catch on fire and burn the whole parking garage down. But I do want to point out, one of our viewers, Michael, made this good comment, how he said, however, all modern cars are shite with over-reliance on electronics and poor design. And I have to agree with that. It's been frustrating for me. I've been looking at replacing a car that I have that I bought used, but it was made in 2016. And I cannot find, even from the same maker, anything that's made quite as solidly as something even as recent as 2016. So that's kind of a bummer. I think everything is going downhill, and most EVs that I have, like closed the door on, I'm one of those like tactile people when it comes to cars to see if they feel cheap or not. And all those EVs always felt so cheap. I'm sure the Cybertruck doesn't. I haven't been in one of those yet, but yeah, it's not appealing to most people. And most people I know who have electric vehicles have them as a second vehicle, not their primary. They have it for their like bop around. And yeah, it's just a tough place. I'm the resident, Climate Realism Show EV apologist, because I think that they're not utterly worthless, but it's definitely not something that should have ever been mandated. The technology just isn't there for wide adoption.
I like EV toys. I like EV, the little cars that my nephews can ride in. I like EV golf carts. Nothing wrong with those. I just don't want them. I just don't want a bomb on the road next to me, whose power might just run out at any moment. It's sad that the government, it's always wise people. They know better than the market. They know better than everyone else that says, this is the technology, like Granholm. The transition, you can't stop. It's inevitable. They always know best. I'm sorry. They're not wise. They're stupid. They can't outguess the market. They can't predict the future. They never have been able to, and they can't now concerning these.
And Climate Bell points out, and I'm sure that this is correct, that my complaints about the cheapness of feeling of cars nowadays is likely to reduce the weight of the vehicle. And he's probably right, especially on electric vehicles, because that battery uses up so much weight. It's just a mess all around.
Well, it's going to be funny in a few years. People make fun of Cuba. They point out to Cuba's got these cars that are running from the 60s and the 50s on their streets. And we know why that is. It has to do with U.S. sanctions and things like that. But I'd like to point out, they've got cars from the 50s and the 60s still running on the streets.
Yeah.
There's no battery car, there's no Tesla that was sold last year or the year before that 70 years later will still be operational.
Right. And the reason I picked this as my crazy climate story of 2025 is because of how it ties in with the entire global climate agenda. You have to raise CAFE standards to absolutely unsustainable levels by government mandate so that the only legal vehicles on the street are electric. And they're not actually green. You can see they tend to self-combust in ways that internal combustion engine, internal combustion, you could call an EV an external combustion engine at certain times, because that's what happens. But this is all tied into the green madness and to the idea. That's why I played that Jennifer Granholm clip. The entire global climate agenda requires the experts and our ruling class to tell us exactly how we have to live, what cars we have to drive, how much energy we can use, how we heat our homes. And if humans are not causing a climate crisis, all of this is bullshit and not necessary. And the short answer is that's true. It's bullshit and not necessary.
You know what I think I'm going to do this year? I think instead of having on my TV the traditional fireplace video, I'm going to have a collage of EVs burning.
Yep. That'll bring a smile to your face, at least mine, and keep you warm at night. All right. Our second crazy climate news item of 2025 comes from Sterling. We've titled this "Trump Kills Wind," or breaks wind, if you prefer that. But he broke the wind industry. Let's set this up a little background for you. This is from Reuters. Wind and solar power frozen out of Trump permitting push. Donald Trump's freeze on approvals for major onshore wind and solar projects is leaving thousands of megawatts of clean power capacity in limbo at a time of soaring demand for electricity. Just one solar project has been approved on federal land since Trump took office in January, and none have been permitted since July, when Interior Secretary Doug Burgum ordered that all new decisions related to renewable energy products require his personal sign-off. Here we have another item. This is from Yale 360. Facing a hostile administration, U.S. offshore wind is in retreat. Tim Sullivan, he is the head of New Jersey's Economic Development Authority. They have been closely involved with the state's efforts to develop offshore wind in the Atlantic Ocean. He sounded wistful. Quote, I remain optimistic and confident that it gets done sometime in our lifetime. That is, building offshore wind. Optimism about the future of U.S. offshore has collapsed since President Trump, a vehement critic of the industry, returned to office in January. In the ensuing 9 months, his administration has accelerated the end of federal tax credits for wind development, imposed tariffs on turbines and other needed parts, and eliminated funds for building onshore port facilities for servicing wind farms. Analysts say the administration's policies will lead to $114 billion in offshore wind investments being canceled or delayed. This has had a devastating effect on offshore wind, especially on the East Coast, where just 2 years ago, some 30 utility-scale wind farm lease areas spread across the continental shelf waters from Maine to South Carolina were in the permitting and planning stages of development. Today, not so much. Sterling, we could bring up on the screen a webpage from WHITEHOUSE.GOV kind of laying out how Trump in detail has thwarted and killed the wind market. But, maybe you can go through that and explain why you think this is such a big story.
Well, look, almost immediately upon Trump being sworn in, he signed some executive orders, and wind plants started to decline. Lava Ridge was canceled within a month of it had been permitted as it was a land based in Idaho. It went away. To be fair, many wind farms, offshore wind farms, were struggling even before Trump because the economics aren't there. They kept having to go back to the states where they wanted to be built offshore, where they wanted to blight their beach views, where they wanted to kill whales, where they wanted to do all sorts of things for intermittent, expensive energy. But the costs keep rising. Their loan costs were rising. Their inflation was killing them. So a lot of these things were being canceled or renegotiated. They go back to the state and say, yeah, we said we could build it for this, but we can't. We know we have a contract with you, but too bad. Give us more money. So multiple wind farms, that was happening too. And then Trump comes along and he says, A, you didn't do the permitting right. You didn't consider all the things that by law you're supposed to consider because Biden wanted to expedite these things. B, you're getting all this money. And this is where what Trump's fact sheet's talking about. A lot of the subsidies ended that were given in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act.
Mm-hmm.
It was never about inflation. Even Biden eventually admitted that it was always about pushing green energy, the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam, as Trump calls it. So they had all these tax credits that extended forever, for 10, 15 years. And Trump said, nope. In the big, beautiful bill, he got Congress to agree with him, and they cut off the subsidies short. And they put in deadlines. You have to be in construction a certain percent before the deadline comes out to qualify for any of the subsidies. And it's just killing them. They put on hold all sorts of wind farms off the East Coast. Now, you mentioned that, it's not just wind, it's solar, and they hadn't approved a new solar since July. Well, Burgum's doing a little bit backsliding. He seems to be the weak link in the administration. They approved a new solar farm, 700 megawatt solar farm in Nevada today. They said, get going. And look, it's just, let's raise as much cost to your energy as possible by putting more solar, more wind, more battery backup. Let's talk about battery backup, because they don't want to build more natural gas or much. They certainly don't want coal. Nuclear takes a long time. So all these intermittent sources, they're building all this battery backup. How good is that battery backup? I'll tell you. Even the biggest battery farms can provide energy for a certain area. You know, let's say we're in Texas in 2021. The power went out in the winter. Amazing. In Texas in the winter, the power went out. If there had been enough battery backup to supply the whole area, and there is not in the world to supply the whole area of Texas that needed coverage, it would have provided an hour's worth of power. The power was out 3 days. That's no good. So we used to know how to design a power grid. The prime thing was baseload power, 24 hours a day on demand. You flick on the switch, you have power. And then there is peaking power or backup power when power demand goes up. And you relied on things that were reliable. It was designed by engineers, not by politicians and their fantasies. That is not the grid we increasingly have today. And thankfully, Trump gets it. He has kept open at least 3, maybe 4 coal plants that were supposed to close already this year, and said, nope, we're not letting you do it. Why? We don't want the power outages. People deserve power. We're not going to let you close those plants just so you can make more money building wind and solar.
Yeah. Before we leave this subject, and maybe you guys also want to weigh in on Trump killing wind, but here's a story I want to bring up that's a little closer to home, at least my home, as I live in Northern Illinois. And that's how Governor J.B. Pritzker, who has his eyes set on the White House, is set to approve an energy bill that's boosting battery storage, as you mentioned, Sterling, for renewables, despite the debate over the costs. And so that's part of the green scheme here is you build a bunch of wind turbines and solar installations, and then you store the power created when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining in huge battery installations to serve as backup when it's at night and the wind isn't blowing. It's a completely complicated and useless and really expensive and dangerous scheme. It says here, sweeping energy-related legislation that backs the use of big batteries to help make wind and solar power more effective, but has raised questions about whether it will increase or decrease energy bills. Wow. Clear the Illinois Senate Thursday night. It'll be headed to Pritzker, who signaled he'll sign it. Legislative Democrats have said the measure would eventually lower electricity bills for Illinois consumers burdened by utility rate spikes driven by rising power grid demand, while Republicans noted that massive battery installations would be backed in part by a surcharge on consumers' monthly bills. The cost of getting 3 gigawatts of batteries up and running on the grid by 2031 would add 58 to 68 cents per month to the average residential bill for AMREN customers in mostly downstate Illinois, and 40 to 48 cents for Commonwealth Edison customers in the Chicago region, according to an analysis. However, the agency said the batteries would pay for themselves by reducing anticipated rate increases for future space on regional transmission grids. Guys, this sounds like the biggest pig in a poke in the history of Illinois and maybe the country. If you have to tell me it's going to be cheaper, I don't believe you.
Well, if you have to put a surcharge on it, it's not cheaper. If you have to add cost to something that's supposed to be cheaper, then it's not cheaper. Cheaper is reducing the cost. In the end, this is, look, you're affected by this, Jim. I'm not affected by this. You may save money in the long run when your grid collapses and so you don't have power. So you're not paying for power while your power is out. That may save you money. And if that's a trade-off, the people in Illinois are willing to embrace Godspeed and more power to you. That's not a trade-off I want. And you talk about danger. These battery plants are dangerous.
Well,
I think we have a video showing.
Just
that.
look at what happened at Moss Landing in California. You know, they decided to take this perfectly fine power plant and turn it into a battery storage facility. It caught fire, you know, and boom. What did they get out of it? Nothing. They got nothing but a bunch of pollution and a bunch of failure. That's all it is.
It burned for days because it's hard to put these things out. It's dangerous for the people, the firefighters, to put it out because of the toxins. And that's in San Diego. That's not the only place. The big battery farm in Australia, that happened. It burned for days. Now, when I say it, you see that and you go, oh, well, that doesn't look like a big fire. The pollution coming out of there made them evacuate the houses and businesses around that, but not because they thought the fire was spread, just because the toxins that were going up.
Yeah, Sterling, you live in the Free Republic of Texas. I live in the communist state of Illinois. I am confident that they will find a way to charge me for my electricity, even though they don't give me any electricity. I'll be charged for it one way or the other.
Jim, to be fair, it's the People's Republic of Illinois.
That's true. The Democratic People's Republic of Illinois. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is good news. And, the only question I guess left, before we move on to the next subject is, federal policy means something. It's meaningful. It has short-term effects, as we see here with Trump reversing the green policies of the Biden administration. I wonder if, so are we just going to flip back and forth between pursuing expensive green dreams and going to energy that actually works and automobile regulations that actually make sense? Is there any way to keep these things more permanent, at least maybe for a decade before we try it again?
People going out and voting for the right people, having judges not be activists and decide that the law isn't what the law says.
Yeah, it's going to take Congress. Trump can only do so much with executive orders, just like when Biden came into office, he just undid everything that Trump did in the first day. So It was, it's going to take some doing. And unfortunately, I don't have very much faith in our Republicans that they'll actually be willing to do anything, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I might be being too cynical.
My assertion, it wouldn't happen without private sector buy-in. And, the reason why Ford thought they could endure billions of dollars of losses year after year in electric vehicles is because they thought down the road, eventually we'll be able to make money. And Trump pulled the rug out from under them, and now those losses are permanent. If the next time the green weenies are trying to impose global or national policy and they need the buy-in of the private sector needs to say no. We are not going to do it. They need to oppose it. They need to actively oppose it. And they need to come on shows like this. They need to communicate what we say on shows like this, that it is not necessary and it's economically infeasible.
Look, they are not Randian brave characters that will stand in the face of what government wants them to do. They depend too much on government largesse and regulations. Ford thought it could make money not just on the sales, because Tesla, as far as I can tell, has never made money on the sales. It's made money on selling the carbon credits that it generates under federal policy. And Ford thought it could do that, except that its vehicles weren't selling. Unlike Tesla's, how many Ford Lightnings have you seen on the road? Did you ever go to a Ford lot and see their electric vehicles flying off the lot? No, you didn't. So they were manufacturing these things, but they only get the carbon credit when they're sold and on the road. They weren't getting carbon credits. They weren't selling vehicles. They're losing money hand over fist. That's true for, GM took losses. Stellantis was going to be all electric. Now they said, no. I thought that was the stupidest thing. They had very few models on the road anyway. And the ones that they had that were really, pretty popular, the Charger and the Challenger, they said, no, we don't want that anymore. Now they're bringing them back. Less than a year after they canceled them, they're bringing them back.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on to Anthony's choice. He'll give a little presentation here on what he thinks is the craziest climate news of 2025. And Anthony, I know you have some slides. Why don't you just take it away?
Yeah, well, I got two topics. One of them is COP and the other is temperature. And both of them have started crashing this year. Of course, the COP30 conference was a dismal failure on all fronts, including having a fire at the end. Maybe some lithium caught fire there. Who knows? We don't know. What we do know is that it's been universally panned. Now, let's go with the COP slides first, Andy, the ones at the top. There we go. So, yeah, I've showed this before, but I want to show it again because it's really important. These bureaucrats have had 30 of these conferences now all over the world, all the way back to 1992. 30 of them. And what's happened? Nothing. Global temperature has not changed. Actually, it continues to go up. So they're completely ineffective. The same thing happens when you look at things like the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We got to have net zero. Well, net zero is a fantasy. It's absolute total fantasy. Look at that. Carbon dioxide continues to rise despite the pronunciations of the bureaucrats and the whalers and the people that say that we have to save the planet. Then there's the folks that said back in 1989, hey, you know what? The whole countries are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. That was a UN bureaucrat speaking to the Associated Press. Well, that never happened. And look, sea level rise has not changed. It continues to go up at the slow, steady, reasonable pace that it's done so ever since 1850. If you go back and look at some of the tide gauges, like the one at the Battery in New York City, it has had a slow, steady rise all this time, and there's been no change in the rate of it. Now, there's a lot of folks out there that are claiming sea level rise is accelerating. That's their new, frightening meme out there. Well, the only reason it's accelerating is because we've been looking at it with satellites, and I've always thought that the whole premise of trying to measure sea level rise from space was just plain stupid. Because how do you measure, incremental millimeters of change from 23,500 miles up in a geostationary orbit? They claim they can, after they filter out all the noise and run it through processing and whatever. But what we discovered, and that was our own Willis Etkenbach on What's Up With That, that when they switched satellite, because satellites have limited lifespan, they had different slopes of measurement. And so, yeah, they were able to detect the rising sea level rise, but they kept getting steeper as time went on. And so that is the reason that sea level rise is not accelerating. And by the way, I want to point out, for those of you that have not bought it yet, Climate at a Glance, our book describes all of that and many, many other things. So check it out, climateataglance.com, or go to Amazon and get a copy of our book, Climate at a Glance, 40 Prominent Climate Topics. Now, back to what I was talking about with the slides.
Makes a
yes,
great
it does.
stuffer.
Yeah, or just mail it to a liberal friend. Don't leave your name on it or anything. Just mail it to. But I want to go back to my slides, Andy. So now the next slide is the satellite temperature done by Dr. Roy Spencer and Dr. John Christie of the University of Alabama, Huntsville. Now, the most important thing is over there on the far right. We had the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption in 2021, 2022 timeframe. And of course, it injected huge amounts of water vapor into the upper atmosphere around the equator. And guess what happened? Since water vapor is the strongest greenhouse gas, the global temperature went up. No surprise there. Of course, all the whalers out there are saying, it's carbon dioxide, we're going to fry. But that's not happening because look, it's coming down. It's crashing. And it's not just in the satellite record. It's also happening in the surface record. Let's go to the next slide. And you'll see, in the surface record, the average temperature anomaly for the United States, it's not there. We don't see this big giant spike. This is the USCRN from the United States. And, what's interesting is that now, 2025, they're out there ballyhooing this. 2025 is now tied with 2023 for the second warmest year on record. Let's go to that slide, Andy, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. There, look at that. It's gone down in the surface temperature record, too. And so they're saying, well, it's the second warmest on record. Well, what's going to happen next year when it's the third or fourth or maybe the fifth warmest on record? Because the water vapor comes out of the atmosphere and the temperature goes down. they're going to have a real problem on their hands. And so my prediction for 2026 is that temperature will go down globally, and they won't be able to make the kinds of claims that they've been making the last couple of years because all the water from the Hunga Tonga eruption is out of the atmosphere, and we're back to, the slow, steady rise in temperature that we've had since 1850, and the crisis is averted.
My prediction is that since being a climate alarmist means never having to say you're wrong or sorry, that they will still claim that there's a climate crisis and that humans are causing it, and that never, ignore the man behind the curtain, the data, believe what we're telling you.
Yeah. Hey, Linnea, I have a question for you. Are those T-Rexes on your Christmas shirt there, your Christmas sweater?
They sure are.
Well,
Yeah.
that reminds me. Do you know why T-Rexes never exchange Christmas gifts?
Why?
Because their arms are too short to wrap the presents.
Oh, that's a sad.
I thought it was because they ate anyone that they were going to give it to before they exchanged.
Goodness gracious. Yep. Well, it's pretty incredible to watch our own dinosaurs going extinct here from COP. Man, be very interesting to see how the next conference goes, considering how bad this one was. I mean, is anybody going to show up? That's the question that I have.
Where is it? Where is COP 31 supposed to be again?
It was supposed to be in Australia, but they yanked it. And I know 32 is Ethiopia. 31 is I don't remember.
Yeah, and nobody's going to remember. That's the point. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Anthony. And that's a good presentation. And if you like presentations like that in even more greater depth, you should come to our climate conference, April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. Anthony will be presenting there. Sterling and Linnea will be presenting there. And we're actually going to do a live on the scene at the conference version of the Climate Realism show, streaming to the whole world. So you'll get audience participation from the room as well as the chat. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So everybody here on this show.
Yeah. Looks like Turkey is going to be where the conference is.
Turkey. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Turkey. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, so everybody on this show, if you ever wanted to meet us, that's your chance. April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. All right. Let's move on to Linnea's choice for the crazy climate news of 2025. And this is, the Bird Roaster 9000 has shut down.
Yeah. So this is sorry.
Yeah, just let me read a little bit to set up for our audience here. This comes from our friends at the Institute for Energy Research, that California has shut down its solar thermal plant 13 years early. So the Ivanpah Solar Power Facility is set to shut down in 2026 after failing to meet its energy targets. Ivanpah is located near the California-Nevada border, 65 miles southwest of Las Vegas. Despite receiving $1.6 billion in federal loan guarantees, nearly 75% of the facility's cost is its struggle to generate power and had to rely on natural gas to operate rather than the sun. The plant, which features 3 459-foot towers and thousands of computer-controlled mirrors, known as heliostats, cost $2.2 billion to build. Construction started in 2010 and was completed in 2014, ranking it then as the world's largest solar plant. Ivanpah was expected to generate 940,000 megawatts of power per year. That power never materialized at all. Ivanpah has also not been a friend to wildlife. According to the Association of Avian Veterinarians, the power plant is responsible for at least 6,000 bird deaths per year. All right, Linnea, you did cleverly call this the Bird Roaster 9000, and we have some B-roll that will show that that's the case because it was better at cooking birds than making human-used power.
Yeah, it's like the biggest, least controllable instant rotisserie machine. It's really sad. Especially since, you don't even know how, little tiny birds just get like obliterated, and larger raptors and stuff get scorched when they approach it. But what really struck me about this one failing is I had been assuming, without doing too much research on the background, that concentrated solar thermal was going to be better, more efficient, or more effective than photovoltaics, because it takes up less land to do, supposedly more power, and it's just not at all the case. This thing, I think I read somewhere that it takes up like 120 something thousand acres or something along. I mean, just unbelievable amount of land that this thing takes up. And it's just not providing power. In fact, it's sucking power in the form of natural gas to stay operational. It's the world's biggest boondoggle. $2.2 billion to build it.
A lot of
and
federal
most
money.
Of that, yeah, and most of that coming in the form of, federal loans. It's a catastrophic failure for the Greens, and they're not the only ones either. California recently reduced their net metering price that they give to the people who have like rooftop solar. So for people in the audience who aren't aware, most states actually have a program for your rooftop solar called net metering, and you can get paid for the excess power that your panels generate. In the afternoon, they generate the most amount of electricity, but you don't use all that much electricity off the grid in the mid-afternoon. It comes later in the evening when people are coming home from work that most of the power use is had. So you have all this excess power from these panels. And so the utility company, when you're hooked into the grid, is required to pay you for that. And most states pay people retail prices, not wholesale, where the utility would be getting the rest of their power from the power plants at wholesale prices. So it's actually costing money. They have to shift those costs off to the other people who don't have rooftop solar. So it's actually like just everybody else on the grid is subsidizing the people who have rooftop solar. And so California reduced these costs because it was making their, like everybody else's, electricity costs out of control. And all these solar companies are going bankrupt because people aren't buying new solar to put on their roofs because they don't see that they're going to be making money off of it, or they're not going to be reducing their bills by all that much. So, and it's amazing that this like scam program that is net metering, I think it's wildly unethical, is like the second that it's not removed but reduced a little bit, the entire industry falls apart and starts having big layoffs and stuff. It's just incredible.
That happened in the past every time the production tax credit lapsed. Within a day of the production tax credit lapsing, when they couldn't get a big bill to continue the funding, factories would shut down. Despite it being cheaper and all the demand, the market, it's competitive. No, it never was. And then it comes back as soon as they update, re-up the production tax credit in some boondoggle big omnibus bill at the end of or at the beginning of the next year. I think I was watching those birds keep being incinerated. I was both fascinated and appalled as the video was running. And, they had to come up with a whole new term for that. They're called streamers. This is streamers. And we've spoken too soon, because though Ivanpah wants to shut down, though Gavin Newsom and the state of California wants him to shut down, the California Public Utilities Commission has said, no, you may not shut down. And so Ivanpah will continue killing birds and operating at a loss until maybe they replace the California Public Utility Commission. I don't know, because it seems to be the only entity that wants Ivanpah to continue operating, but it's ordered it to do so.
Yeah, the order was that they're closing down 2 of their towers, but one of them is staying operational. But man, if they couldn't generate enough power to pay the bills or to even, be useful in any way with 3 towers, what's 1 tower going to do, really?
Yeah, well, based on the video we just saw, I would say that the whole project was chicken pot pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, you
terrible.
know, it's not just a danger to birds. They had to divert flights around that place because
Yeah.
it would blind the pilots. So they literally had to change the air routes, as if we don't already have enough hazards in the sky and national security concerns if there were military aircraft. That was a boondoggle from the beginning.
Yeah, I've been on flights out of Vegas and I saw those things in operation, and you know, just looking out the window, oh my goodness, those things were just incredibly bright. And I can't imagine if a flight accidentally, you know, got into a path where a beam got reflected or something towards it, it would be also awful, just absolutely awful.
Only something that big and that awful could occur with the help of government.
Yeah.
You know, Elon Musk would never, you know, he's a big green energy guy. He would never build something like that.
Not if he had to pay for it himself.
That's right. I mean, look at that thing. It looks like something out of a dystopian science fiction film. It's amazing. You know, but it's closing down, or it has to shut down early. It never even approached generating the megawatts of power that were promised. Again, if you're in government, you can make promises and it doesn't matter. If you're in the private sector risking your own money, you have to deliver on those promises, and you need realistic expectations. This is completely out of line with those expectations. It's like, that's why I don't believe it when Illinois says, don't worry, going all green and making these battery farms are going to reduce your energy prices. No, they're not, because you're all liars, because the track record of these sorts of projects is horrible. I would love somebody to come on this show and in the chat and make me a list of the green energy projects that have come in under budget, produced as much energy as promised, and reduced prices. We'd be sitting here waiting for a very long time.
It will never gain back what it costs to build, much less make a profit.
No.
When I was working, you know, this is more than a decade ago, when I was working at a different think tank, there was a new subdivision outside of Austin that advertised itself as net zero, that it was all going to be run on green energy. And they explained to the newspaper, which just uncritically published it, basically the press release, telling how good this was and how well it would work. And, you know, they talked about these rooftop solar panels and how long they would last. And so I looked into the numbers, and it turns out that because of the way solar panels decline over time, and unless they were maintained regularly, washed, they were going to go offline in between 20 to 25 years. They themselves said they would have to be replaced then. The problem was they were being financed over 30 years. So I'm sorry, you're replacing these things 5 years before you paid them off, which means you never pay them off. You keep tacking on another 5 years, another 5 years. It was idiotic. And the press, the news couldn't be bothered to just look and say, hold it. If it takes 30 years to pay off, but they stop functioning in 25 years and you replace them, then they're never paid off. They don't pay for themselves.
And we have people in the comments pointing out that, you know, like there's a place for rooftop solar that you can have. And I agree with that. I think off grid, like not net metered, off grid rooftop solar, where you have your batteries in your house that you're, you know, trickle charging throughout the day with your rooftop solar. That seems like a cool, fun, like off-grid thing. I know people who do it and they like it. Incredibly expensive up front to have a really good system, but if it's worth it to you, it's worth it. But yeah, it's a much trickier discussion when you start talking about connected to grid rooftop solar.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Anthony. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to point out to our producer, Andy, that I just posted a photo of this thing you can see from the air and see how bad the glare is. If it's on our internal channel, if you can pull it up. For some reason, it doesn't work. Oh, well, that's technology for you. But anyway, even Even the pictures fail at this place.
Just go and watch the movie Sahara with Matthew McConaughey in it. And that movie, they have a scene with one of these concentrated solar facilities. I think in real life, this particular scene, they would be themselves roasted, because from what I understand, that close to the tower, it's like 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's a good movie, and you can get an idea of how big like a smaller one of these is. So
they had really high level sunblock on, so that's okay.
Yeah. I did. Somebody in the comments said that they should just sell the place to KFC, you know?
There you go. Maybe
Yeah, here's the photo.
Can go in together.
Here's an aerial photo of the whole thing. I mean, can you imagine having to deal with that, flying? Ugh.
Yeah, it's an
the aliens are probably like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful area of the country. I think the desert is beautiful wilderness, and they don't care about the birds that they're frying in the air, and of course all the animals on the land. Their habitat is destroyed. It's never accounted for by these green dreamers. And
they had to move endangered desert tortoise to new areas to build this thing. It's like, well, hold it. If they weren't there in the first place, maybe they weren't supposed to be there.
Right.
Maybe it's not really suitable habitat.
Right. But we just keep spending all this taxpayer money on these Rube Goldberg machine energy projects. It's absurd. Look how complicated that is. To make that way, even the concept of it is so complicated.
And you know what it is? It's to heat water to boil to turn turbines with steam. The same thing you can just do with a small nuclear plant. So what's the point of all of this? It's very silly. And the amount of water that these things use, because one, keeping the mirrors clean, or the heliostats, whatever they're called, and also just the whole thing runs on water. So yeah, it is. Or I think it's some kind of an advanced fluid. I don't think it's just water in there.
It's a kind of oil.
I think in the future there will probably be a science fiction movie about this, where at the end it will be Soylent Green is made of streamers.
Well, no, they could have one though where we save the world with concentrated solar as the aliens come down, and we just pointed at their ships.
Yeah, there's got to be a use for it somewhere, but producing energy isn't the right one.
Yeah, big laser weapon. Great. That's good thinking, Sterling.
Yeah, there you go.
Giant laser weapon.
Concentrated energy weapon.
Giant concentrated solar. Right into their eyes. I've seen the aliens. They have really big eyes. So the concentrated solar would really blind them quick. Unfortunately, they might crash into like Mount Rushmore or something.
All right.
That would be bad.
All right. Well, before we get to Q&A, it is ad read time, because I want to tell you about the sponsor of the Climate Realism show, and that is Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows like I do on streaming services, you hear tons of pitches to buy gold and silver and other precious metals. And there are so many companies out there that offer that. But we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and it's the man who runs the company, Ira Brashatsky. He's the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he's not one of those guys that employs high-pressure tactics or engages in deceptive marketing ploys, like, frankly, many of them in big gold. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you are dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when it comes time to liquidate your this very valuable asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you're going to have that investment sent directly and discreetly to your home. Ira, by the way, is advertising on our program and with the Heartland Institute because he is an America First patriot. He doesn't donate to left-wing causes. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. And that's why we are so proud to have Ira and Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your portfolio, if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira or someone on his team will be in touch with you and make the whole process very easy. Again, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us while you're helping your financial future. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And now we are ready for one of our favorite parts of the show, and that is Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
Yeah, hooray. No. Okay, you guys. So the first question, and we got a couple of these, and I think it's very important that we address this ahead of the conference. Wheelie Stew asks, how many trees did you cut down to host your conference? Did we flatten a rainforest in order to host our conference in Washington, D.C. this year?
No, we're not holding it in Brazil. We're not holding it in Brazil in the rainforest. So we're having it in a developed area.
We're ahead of the game.
And a hotel has been around for a long time, so its carbon footprint is minuscule.
Yes, exactly. All right, Climate Bell says, it is maddening that governments have misled people so badly on the climate nonsense. Are they stupid, corrupt, or both? Anthony?
Yes.
Is that the consensus here?
I don't think most of these people are stupid. I think many of them are corrupt. They're profiting, but I think even more of them are moral scolds. They have a view of the world. They know what the world should look like, and they're willing to force you into their box to make it fit into the world they think as it should be. That's the problem. Look, you can say what you will about the mafia. They don't typically care what goes on in your house and household so long as you pay them off. But moral scolds, they know no bounds. They want to know what you're doing in your home. They want to know what energy you're using. They want to know what kind of car you drive. They want to know all sorts of things that ain't their business. But they have no conscience about it because their conscience is salved because they're saving the earth. And I think a lot of them are like that.
That's a good point. These people are really into everything in your household: insulation, your dishwasher, your microwave, the water heater. I mean, geez, they got their fingers in every pie in your life, and they have no bound. You're right.
I also want to read this nice comment from a longtime friend of Heartland, Dave Ball, who says, thanks for fighting the good fight for honest science, Heartland. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Alrighty. This is kind of a long question from Levi Kress, but I am going to try to read the whole thing. I just won't be able to have the whole thing up on the screen at the same time, but I think it's a good question. All right. Question about the Equal Access to Justice Act, which I'm not super familiar for, but they said, in the wildlife or hunting world, there has been abuse of the EAJA by 501c3 groups. Some 501c3s with net worths of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars are suing the government and being reimbursed for attorney's fees. Is this also done in the climate world? It seems like a racket where some groups have large staffs of attorneys and self-fund by serially suing the government for reimbursement to perpetually pay their own salaries.
Well, the short answer
We've
is
seen a
yes.
lot of that with these climate lawsuits. Most recent one going on in Taiwan, where they're suing Shell Oil Company for causing an intensification of a typhoon. Now, these things have been done in the past. All kinds of claims have been made about, this oil company caused this, or oil companies in general caused that, or coal companies, whatever. And these things inevitably fail because there is no way to find the physical evidence to tie this event to this change in the atmosphere. You just can't do it. I mean, these rapid attribution model studies, they don't do it either. And so they inevitably end up failing. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of these NGOs that have a huge amount of lawyers on their staffs. And they're out there basically shaking the bushes, or more accurately, shaking you down, trying to get you to conform so that they can bring in money to keep the organization going.
Yeah, the Natural Resources Defense Council is almost all attorneys. And you're right. They do sue for payment in the climate realm. The whole area of lawfare in climate is awful. They fund studies that they then cite, and the judge finds out, hold it, you funded the study. We can't use this. But he after they've wasted millions of dollars of their plaintiffs, their defendants' fees. But they also have another tricky mechanism. When they've got the right administration, they sue and the administration, because it agrees with them, settles. They say, "Oh, you're right. We haven't been enforcing the act as we're supposed to. So we will not only give you money, but we will agree not to do this in the future, and we'll make laws even more stringent." And that has largely ended under Trump. He's no longer settling these things, and he's no longer paying them off.
Yeah, it was setting. Yeah, I was going to mention that, Sterling. It's setting environmental policy in the United States, not through debates or legislation or consensus or having people agree to it, but having an inside game where you put leftist environmentalists in the agencies of the federal government, and then you get a leftist environmentalist NGO to sue, to impose the instantly impose by law, by the courts, policies that nobody actually supports but them.
A consent decree. Yeah, you get it through consent decree. Oh, okay. We consent. We agree.
All right. This question from Bob Berry, who says, any comment on defunding NCAR?
Well, I wrote an op-ed about that over at What's Up With That just a couple of days ago. And I've been to NCAR. I understand what they do there. I've known about it since the late 70s. Actually, I worked with them on a computer link with the university I was attending then. But point is that they have a lot of valuable resources there that can be reutilized or repurposed. So just shutting it down is just a bit of an overkill in my view. Dialing it back, making the climate models less of a motive for, the operation of the place. Yeah, that's a good thing. But we have this supercomputer facility that they built. NCAR is located in Boulder, Colorado, but just about 100 miles up the road in Wyoming, not too far from Cheyenne. They have, a supercomputing facility that they built there to run climate models. Why? Well, because guess what? Coal is cheap. And it's in Wyoming, and there's no regulations in Wyoming preventing you from using coal to make big power plants. Gosh, what a concept. And so they have this fantastic computer facility there. They should just simply repurpose that. There's lots of things that it can be used for. And then, they can still keep some of the staff on at NCAR, doing useful things, like working on better weather forecasting, working on better warning systems, working on better mitigation models, things like that. Those are all good, but the whole climate model madness needs to be dialed down. And while I applaud President Trump for making the effort, just simply, completely closing the facility is throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I think that's the same position that our friend Chris Martz came down on. Is like, well, hang on, you can stop him from taking, kind of like a ideological position on their data and on their model running and stuff, but you don't have to shut it down. And that's one of the things that we've had come up a couple times with the Trump administration this year, is them talking about shutting down like data collection agencies. That I personally don't think that's a good idea, because continuing to get more and more data is actually helping our side of the argument, not the other side. So yeah, I think it's just overkill.
They should shut down the data manufacturing, not the data gathering.
I'm going to be the skunk at this garden party. One of my friends said, this is the kind of change that I voted for. And the reason is, having read the Constitution, I see nothing in the Constitution about the federal government collecting data or predicting the weather or anything else. And I don't want the government doing it, the federal government doing it. Eisenhower warned about the co-option of science by big government with funding after the nuclear, remember, big government funded science didn't start until we started building the bomb. And Eisenhower saw the dangers of it. He said, not only would the government funding corrupt science, but scientific elites would corrupt the government process. And that's what's happened with NCAR. They've gone off on their own. They've had mission creep. And there's no, in my opinion, there's no way to avoid it. You got a government agency. Government agencies grow. They metastasize. They never, I don't know any of them that ever shrink or keep to their mission, their original mission. They find new missions. And so if NCAR goes away, they can sell the equipment to private sector if the private sector wants to continue doing the kind of thing. But like I said, I've read the Constitution. I don't see them granted that power in there, and so they shouldn't be doing it.
Chris Nisbet asked in the comments whether or not they're staffed with alarmists. And I can say that when I visited there, I did see many, many, many people that fit that description. There were 2 people, however, that did not fit that description. And that was the lady that ran the gift shop and the guy that is the custodian.
There you go. There you go.
All right, this question from Chris says, are the owners of wind or solar installations obliged to restore the environment when they reach end of life? I'm sure they are, but maybe they get some kind of a pass on it, but I'm not sure.
That's a good question, and in fact, they don't. Look,
they don't. Wow.
Wind facilities, no, they don't have end of life. They're not regulated by laws like coal mines have to repurpose, have to restore the mountaintops that they mine from. But it built into oil and gas operations is reclamation funding. Wind and solar doesn't have to do that. In Hawaii, you can go to Hawaii and see wind turbines that closed down more than a decade ago. They haven't been taken down. They're sitting there rusting. They're just rusting. They're not forced to uninstall them. They're not forced to recycle them. Those laws aren't on the books. Look, the law is late in catching up with new technologies. This is a relatively new push by the government, and the government didn't want to disincentivize it. So they didn't add those costs to wind and solar. Some of them are taken down, and just, in West Texas, we have these big areas where you've got all these wind turbines just piled up.
Yeah. So, and because most industrial facilities do have to have some kind of a plan. And I know, in the oil field, you have to have a plan for how you're going to decommission your pumps and stuff in the well when it's done. But I guess I just assumed that wind and solar would have to as well, but I guess not.
Remember, those regulations came after the industry was already, operating. It had been operating for decades. The same is true here. Look, in Texas, we were uniquely stupid when we started our wind and solar, especially our wind out in West Texas. West Texas is where the wind blows fairly regularly, but we don't need the power in West Texas because no one lives out there. We want the power in East and South Texas, Houston, Dallas, Austin, places like that. They built all these turbines, and they didn't have a damn transmission line running from the turbines to the cities that needed the power. They had these spinning turbines, not sending power anywhere. And they said, oh, well, we got to build some transmission. Years after the turbines had already been in operation. So they soaked ratepayers with transmission lines, a big transmission build out, a decade after these turbines had already been operating, spinning, as far as I can tell, delivering power nowhere.
Isn't that just representative? So Lake Lady says, all the coal plants closed in the Obama-Biden administrations, will they be able to come back online again? It depends. Some of them were closed in a way that they could be brought back online, like intentionally, just in case, like as a peaker plant or something. But many of them were like really decommissioned, and I doubt that those could come back.
Yeah, some of them, look, it depends on why they were closed and when they were closed. A lot of the coal plants were decommissioned and they just sit there. They're rusting at this stage. But they still have the railroad tracks going to them. But some companies said, oh, we don't want them to make us open these back up. So they went in and they ripped out the railroad tracks. They tore down the building. They ripped out the furnaces. Those aren't coming back.
Michael asks, how do we get to a place where fools are running the whole world? I would say probably we've always been that way, in waves, Okay. Here's a good one. And this is for Anthony. Lychee asks, Are rain gauges today better able to capture heavy wind-blown rain versus rain gauges 50 to 100 years ago? And if so, do they homogenize historical precipitation data to take that into account?
Well, there are some rain gauges that are definitely a lot better at measuring this. There's the standard rain gauge, which is still in use throughout much of the United States and the world, is nothing more than a bronze or a brass tube about 9 inches in diameter and about 2.5 feet tall. And they use a dipstick to put down inside of it to measure it. And they have to do that manually every day and then write it down or phone it in. And so that's the majority of the rainfall measurements out there. They have not improved dramatically. Now, when we put together the U.S. Climate Reference Network in 2005, they set up a series of wind baffles in sort of a circumference around the rain gauge. And the wind baffles were designed to slow down the wind and cause the rain to go into the rain gauge instead of just sort of blowing across it. And that's made some improvements. But there's only about 114 of those in the United States. There are some others out there that are better. Now, recently, there has been something called a haptic rain gauge. And this basically, when you're in a house or a building and you hear the rain pattering on the roof, well, basically it takes that signal, that pattering of rain, and turns it into a rain gauge measurement. How they do that, I don't know. I would say there's probably a model. There it is, right there, haptic rainfall sensor. Personally, I'm not a big fan because it's not a measurement. It's a proxy for measurement. And we all know how proxies work in the climate world. They're not all that great. So, and there's a lot of uncertainty associated with proxies. So I would say, no, there hasn't been really any vast global improvements in rainfall. As for the homogenization thing, I don't believe so. They do that for when they're trying to make maps and so forth, they kind of make contours and that sort of thing. But as for overall homogenizing the data, no, I don't think so.
Yep. Okay.
That's more than you ever wanted to know about rain gauges, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's why I kept the question up there, because I think it's a good thing for people to know, because it's something that people don't think about.
Yeah, and this is literally the only show in the world where that could get that question asked and answered like that. Amazing.
All right. Here's another question from Chris, who says, haven't people proposed sticking mirrors in space to reflect sunlight to some spot on Earth as an energy source? What could go wrong?
Yeah, that's been a long time dream of a lot of people, but no, don't do it. Just don't do it, because you fly anything through that beam and it's trouble. They're also thinking about, well, we'll collect the solar energy in space and then send microwaves down, and pick up the energy by microwaves. Same reason. Just don't do it. Anything that flies through there is going to be, microwaved.
How they discovered the microwave, yeah.
Yeah, there was a James Bond movie. There was a James Bond movie in answer to that, where they it was created a laser weapon, basically.
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk has some sort of plans up there, or some kind of schemes that he's going to put solar panels in space. They're like, I don't know.
Yeah, but he's going to do it for his data. He's going to build data centers in space,
right?
And then have them powered, because the sun never stops up there. So,
right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of neat. The only thing you have to deal with is micrometeor damage, but I don't know how NASA deals with that for their ISS. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question from Ian, who says, do you think converting the renewable electricity to hydrogen is a better idea? It just sounds like a lot of steps. It sounds like a lot of energy waste.
Yeah, Plus, hydrogen has a very low energy density. You compare hydrogen and methane, and it's like 4 to 1 with the energy density that it contains. Plus hydrogen is notoriously bad for technology to try to contain. Hydrogen has a habit of leaking out because, it's such a small molecule, 1 electron and 1 proton, it just gets everywhere. And so, it's just not a good idea for hydrogen. If you are taking hydrogen and putting it into some kind of a chemical substrate that encapsulates it, and then it pushes it out slowly, that's not a bad idea. I think there's some kind of I forget what the name of it is, but there's a kind of a sponge chemical that you can put the hydrogen into, and it works for cars. The only application I see where hydrogen is worthwhile, well, it can be made part of the energy system is with fuel cells. That's it.
Well, I think green hydrogen is less green than wind and solar, because it's an added step to produce energy. You've got a bad energy system, wind and solar, using some of its energy, draining off some of the energy, the electricity it provides to create another dissolute energy system. Hydrogen. It's a system that only a green energy profiteer and the politicians backing it love. And that's why it still exists, is because politicians get money from green energy profiteers that say it's going to save the world. And it's not. The best way of producing hydrogen, if you really want to produce it, is tied to a nuclear plant, not to wind and solar, because at least nuclear provides the energy full time to generate it. But still, it's why go the additional step? It's like imagine a country that would fund taking food off the table and putting it in your fuel tank. Oh yeah, we have that country. It's biofuels, taking corn that people or livestock could eat, taking soybeans that people or livestock, that can be made into oils, turning that into fuel when we have bountiful fuel. That's what hydrogen is.
Yeah, it's like that, and it's also like taking food off of your table and putting it in the composter so that you can grow the exact same food again. And it's like, why didn't you just eat the food that you already like, not scrapped, but like the whole food itself you're putting into the composter? It's just kind of a mess. All right. Paulie, who I have not seen for a little bit, but I'm sure he's been around, says debanking has been in the news. Is climate change denial one of the reasons people are being debanked right now? I don't think people are being debanked for climate denial right now, but they were a couple of years ago.
They were, yeah.
There was a really sad testimony by a small oil field operator, like a mom and pop shop sort of thing. Sorry, I just hit my table. And he was testifying about how his bank had told him that he needs to make like social media posts about how bad the oil industry is and how good green energy is or whatever, in order to get the loan that he was looking for his like well service company that he was running. And that was like just terrible to hear. Very gross stuff. So that stuff is still happening.
Right. And the
just
World
not
Bank,
as much.
Yeah, and the World Bank, probably still the policy, but it was for a long time, would not approve any loans for the building of coal and natural gas power plants in Africa, where they need energy very badly. They would only fund inefficient and expensive green energy programs. So those people are now still without power, reliable power.
Yep. This is a Heartland specific question, and we actually do have an answer to this one. We have, will there also be a Heartland Climate Realism conference here in the EU SSR?
Jim, you want to talk about it?
Go ahead, Sterling.
Well, I don't know when we've had conferences there working with other groups. I don't know that we have one on the books right now.
We don't have one on the books right now. We do on occasion, every other year at the very least, we will partner with friends that we have in Europe, like Ike, the out of Germany. And now we have Heartland UK Europe over there. We have Beachhead. We just celebrated our first anniversary of being there in London in the United Kingdom. So I would just say the short answer is more to come. Maybe we'll see, but we are occasionally, we have a presence on the continent and in the UK, and that will continue.
Yep. Alrighty. And then Engineer Guy, our devoted follower here, who we very much appreciate, says, did I hear Chicago is off to the most snow in 50 years so far this year? Jim, do you know?
Well, who should know is Engineering Guy, Bob. He lives here. He knows. He would, and he's older than me. He would know whether or not. I will say we did have a very early snow. We had about a foot of snow over a few days right after Thanksgiving. But the temperatures actually have risen, and almost all of the snow is melted away. And so I don't know if that's true or not.
Communists just won't know what snow is.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it certainly is the earliest snow I can remember. And I've lived in the Chicagoland area since 2010. This was probably the earliest, most significant snow since I have lived here. So that's 15 years. And we are expected, the forecast, to have a colder and snowier winter overall in Chicago. So we'll see.
They
Yeah,
do.
usually it's the later, the springtime is the bad snow time for Chicago.
I know it's not Chicago, but they've had record snow in British Columbia, Fort St. John, 3 times the amount of snow they normally have by this time of year. That snow is breaking out all over. They've got persistent snow right now in parts of Saudi Arabia. It's amazing.
All right, I'm going to end on this question from our good friend Gerard Marsh, who says, which would be more financially economical, converting the world with wind turbines and solar panels, or filtering the emissions from existing coal-fired power stations? And I would add future coal-fired power stations.
Obviously, B. I'll take
Yeah.
door number 2 on that one. I don't even have an economics degree, and I can figure that out.
More importantly, it's more reliable than powering the world with solar and wind. We can at least count on the energy, even if it's expensive.
Yeah, I love this comment from Tech, who says, someone stole climate change from Cook County or Crook County. It's like, yeah, you can't have anything in Cook County, man. You can't.
The whole thing is a scam. All right. Well, that music there, thank you very much, Linnea, for taking us through Q&A. And that music right there means it is the end of yet another edition of the Climate Realism Show. And in fact, the last Climate Realism Show of 2025. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFACT, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. I want to say Merry Christmas to everyone on the show in the chat. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to you. Merry Christmas, Linnea. Merry Christmas, Sterling. Merry Christmas, Anthony Watts. And again, Merry Christmas to all of you. This show is a success, and we certainly enjoy doing it. And we do it because of people like you who are interested in hearing this topic from a pretty unique perspective. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we will see you again on January 9th, 2026 for our first of regular Friday shows of the next year. Bye-bye.
Blessed Christmas to you all.